Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. It is Arsecast 789. That's a good number. I like when the numbers follow each other in that way, like 2, 3, 4, or 5, 6, 7, or 10,000, 10,001, 10,002. But to be fair, it might be a while before we get to that one. In fact, I think that one will be so far in the future, there probably won't be any kind of human civilization. Or whatever's left of it, it won't be anything that we recognize or would care to be part of. They probably won't be listening to podcasts either. You know, the whole quest for survival shit that they have to go through on a daily basis will take up too much of their time. Scavenging for rats and insects to eat to keep you alive will take priority over listening to two guys, or maybe three guys, or sometimes four guys talking about football. That's just my prediction for the future of the earth and the entire podcasting industry. I could be wrong. Don't make any bets based on anything I've said up to now. We're getting this out early because there's a few bits and bobs going on from a transfer perspective. Gives us a little bit of Arsenal to talk about, at least in the short term. And the thing about these transfer stories is they can go out of date very quickly. So we've recorded and we're getting this podcast out to you, as quickly as we can. Over the weekend, of course, there are the Euro 2024 quarterfinals to keep us entertained. And hopefully we'll get some entertaining games in those. And we will touch on those in this particular conversation. But we're going to start with Arsenal transfer news. And with me to do all that, it is Phil Costa. Hello, Phil.
Hello, Andrew. How's it going?
It's going all right. How's it going with you? Last time I think we spoke, you were, just about leaving Berlin, and now you're in Barcelona, enjoying a summer, unlike the rest of us in this part of the world, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's a cool 28 degrees here today. It probably has been like this for the last 2 weeks as well. Nice and sunny. I've had the windows open, so you get that little bit of fresh air coming in as well. I go out in shorts every day. Not to make anybody jealous or anything, but it has been a busy time, it's fair to say. I think I've assembled more IKEA furniture in the last 3 weeks than I ever will in my life. And it hasn't always been the most smooth process, let's just put it that way, trying to read manuals and finding screws where they shouldn't be and things like that. But otherwise, it's been good. And the Euros have been busy. But I'm enjoying it. So I thought I would be kind of burnt out by now, which it's been exhausting, but I've also really enjoyed it, so I can't really complain.
Yeah, we'll talk a bit later on about the Euros because we look ahead to the quarterfinals without wanting to obviously step on the toes of anyone who might be recording a Euro 2024 podcast on a daily basis. I don't know anyone like that, Phil. Neither of us do, indeed. So we'll talk about those games a bit later on. But in the absence of European football over the last couple of days, there are a few little bits and pieces happening from a transfer perspective, or some stories that are out there anyway. And I think it's fair to say that these stories can change pretty quickly, which is why I'm going to get this podcast out today, because we could record it and then there could be an Orn bomb in the afternoon, which makes everything that we've talked about completely out of date. But the big story, of course, from an Arsenal perspective, and from an incoming perspective, is Riccardo Calafiori, the Italy defender, Bologna defender. There are lots of stories, lots of rumors, lots of buzzword kind of bingo shit going on with this one about preparing documents and in close talks and all those kinds of things, which are part and parcel of the transfer experience right now. I have to say, and I could be proven completely wrong about this, I'm slightly wary about this particular story. Serie A to the Premier League is not a particularly well-tread path, and certainly Serie A to Arsenal is not something we've seen a great deal of in the past. And You know, we've had examples of stories about players in Serie A who they're on the brink of joining Arsenal, and then of course they just end up fucking signing for Juventus or something like that, which is par for the course. So first and foremost, I mean, what's your read on the stories? Is it a case that there's maybe a bit too much smoke for there not to be a bit of fire, or are you taking some distance with this one?
Yeah, I had a feeling this topic might have come up. Despite my appreciation for the player, I didn't give the initial reports too much weight because, as you said, when it comes to Italian players and Italian media in particular, my bullshitometer is usually off the scale. And I've seen this story too many times before where an English club or clubs get linked to someone in Serie A, and then their president comes out and talks about offers or potential agreements being days away, only for Juventus to end up signing said player on a 5-year loan, plus obligation basically involving whatever they can find down the sofa. So, but there does seem to be genuine interest here from Arsenal. And if you, look at the reports, interest that's moving quite quickly, which is understandable after Italy were knocked out of Euro 2024, but also the fact that other teams could potentially be interested and ready to accelerate interest at any time. So I think yes, I will always be wary about Italian players and Italian clubs, but as opposed to the Manuel Locatelli stuff, which I never really got invested in a couple of years ago, this one seems to have a bit more about it. And slowly we've been seeing, the occasional report in Italy turn into some more sound reporting here in England, is what I would say. Whereas before it was just Tutto Mercato Web and, Sports Zone, but now it's slowly becoming Fabrizio Romano, the Evening Standard, the Mail. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see, but it does look like there is something in this interest to say the least.
All right. Well, on that basis, let's try and examine whether or not this is a move that Arsenal should make, or try and get into the reasons why Arsenal might make this particular move. We are, right now, as it stands, completely and utterly well-stocked with left-sided defenders. Gabriel is the left-sided centre-back, and we know his partnership with William Saliba is as strong as it gets, basically. You've got Jakub Kiwior, who can play left centre-back. You've got Takahiro Tomiyasu, who can play left centre-back. Both of those can also play and have played at left-back. You've got Alexander Zinchenko in the squad. You've got Jurrien Timber in the squad. There is Kieran Tierney and Nuno Tavares. They're there as well, whether they're in the plans. Arsenal are replete with options. At the same time, though, it has been well reported that Arsenal are in the market for, or certainly looking for, a left back, or open to the idea of doing or bringing in a left back this summer. And it was always a sort of question like, what kind of left back might they try and bring in? It feels to me like any move for Calafiori is completely dependent on somebody, at least one of those players, going out. Worst case scenario is the stuff with Gabriel and Saudi Arabia rears its ugly head again, and that goes a direction that we don't want. So you're looking at bringing in a left-sided centre-half or somebody who can play in there on the regular. Maybe the best case scenario, I'm not sure if that's the right way to put it, is Zinchenko goes somewhere, or maybe even Kiwior, who's been linked with a move back to Italy, AC Milan, Napoli. I think even Juventus at one point were reportedly interested in him. So he goes back and you replace him with Calafiori in that sense. But unless somebody is going out, this doesn't make any sense to me. But if somebody does go out, and we can get into the player profile in a minute, then you could understand why this is a story that's got some legs.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if this was a move Arsenal made without anybody really going out. I think there are question marks over Zinchenko. There are question marks over Kiwior. Kieran Tierney has kind of been phased out or moved beyond. Nuno Tavares, I mean, that is going to be a get rid at any cost, I think, this situation this summer. So I would be quite amazed if there wasn't any outgoings, to be honest. And I think his profile is an interesting one because I do have some issues with our interest in this player. Maybe not issues, but definitely questions about whether his profile is the profile we need. If you ask me what kind of left back we should be pursuing this summer, I would have said a more two-way player, maybe like a Theo Hernandez, a Nuno Mendes, for example, or even someone like Miguel Gutierrez at Girona, who we've been linked with before, who can hold their own defensively, but are equally capable, if not more, of contributing in the final third, overlapping a bit more traditional in that sense, even though I know what is traditional nowadays. But it looks like Arteta is following the Manchester City blueprint with versatile defenders who can play at centre-back and full-back, which effectively creates depth with fewer players. Instead of relying on specialists, you think of Manuel Akanji, who can play across the back four, Nathan Ake, who can play both at centre-back and left-back, Joško Gvardiol can play at centre-back and left-back, Kyle Walker plays primarily at right-back, but has played centrally before. Even John Stones can play in defensive midfield. So I think the plan is to maybe have a core group of 6 or 7 players and just use them in a variety of positions. And, Ruben Diaz is I think, the only one who can't really play in other positions. While Sergio Gomez, their more offensively minded left back, doesn't seem to get a look in at all. And Joao Cancelo has been phased out completely. So we seem to be following that school of thought, which seemed to be his preference towards the end of last season anyway, with Tomiyasu and Kiwior playing at left back, although that was also influenced by the injury to Yuri and Timber. So that's where I kind of see it. Calafiori gives us versatility across the back four in terms of him being able to play as a left centre back, but also a left back on occasion if needed. I think if Arsenal do sign him, he effectively comes in as a better Kiwior, capable of playing both positions when needed, but someone you would feel a bit more comfortable with stepping in should another player be injured or need a rest. And this isn't anything against Kiwior, by the way, who has been absolutely fine and helped us big time last season when we needed him. But I don't think he looks totally comfortable at left back. And also, I think, maybe 1 foot out of the door is harsh, but the lingering prospect of returning to Italy has always felt on for him, let's say. And he could get us a decent fee should Juventus, Napoli, or Milan come in for him. I've always thought he was going to leave this summer anyway. And I think what we would effectively be doing with Calafiori is just upgrading on Kiwior.
Yeah. I am slightly wary all the same about this player. Not because I think if they identify him as a player that they want, and if they identify qualities in him that they want, I would trust their judgment in that regard. But it feels there's just something doesn't feel quite right about it. And look, again, I could be wrong. This could go out. We could get the Orn bomb about how Arsenal are about to sign him from Bologna. And of course, Arsenal do have a little bit of a relationship with Bologna because that's where we got Tomiyasu from. But again, I wonder about what kind of role they would envisage for him. And I also do take your point about the kind of left back I would prefer to see. Somebody who is, as you say, a bit more up and down. Somebody who's got, we saw it in the game that Italy played. He got forward and provided that last minute assist, but that was from centre half. He's also got a bit of an injury history, which I think if you're looking for somebody to replace Zinchenko, if you're looking for somebody to replace Kieran Tierney, there's enough in his injury history to give you just a little bit of a pause for thought about his availability. And that also, again, as well, Tomiyasu, a player who suffered from intermittent injury, shall we say, whose availability you can't ever be 100% on. I would worry a little bit about that aspect of his career to date.
I will say it's incredible that he is still playing football at all, because his knee was effectively smashed into about 10 million pieces during a UEFA Youth League game when he was 16. I think it was against Victoria Pilsen while he was playing for Roma. And I wouldn't recommend a lot of people to go and look at a video of this injury because it's terrible. I mean, it's like a bit. Who was that player that made the challenge on Mitoma this season? Was it Mason Holgate?
Could have been. Yeah.
And it was high and straight on the knee, and you can literally see it buckle beneath him, and it kept him out for over a year. I think they even came out with quotes from the doctor that said it was like a 1 in 10 year injury. Oof. So it's a miracle that he's even playing football at all. And I think that injury was a huge part of why he didn't make it at Roma, because he just didn't have the opportunity to play after that. And he has a really interesting story, and his route to the top, shall I say, has been quite unconventional, because it's just another example that development isn't always linear in football. He took a gamble moving to FC Basel, but they took a gamble on him as well. And he played well there, earned a move to Bologna after 1 season in Switzerland. And last season was his real breakthrough. Can we say last season, by the way, or is it still this season?
No, it's last season. I think it's last season. Domestic
it's always
season.
A grey area. Yeah. So last season was his real kind of breakthrough, playing for Bologna under Thiago Motta, who finished 5th in Serie A, and secured Champions League football in doing so. Unfortunately, they are in the process of being gutted. Thiago Motta's already gone to Juventus. Calafiori is leaving. Joshua Zirkzee is potentially joining Milan or Manchester United as well, which is a shame, but not unusual for these teams who kind of punch above their weight. But in terms of standout players in Serie A last season, he was absolutely one of those, and playing in a role that is really not seen a lot as a centre-back. He was given freedom to basically do whatever he liked, and that shows you the respect that he commanded from somebody like Thiago Motta, who was a very smart technical player in his own playing career as well. And Bologna are often playing wacky formations. That he's often been criticised for playing a 2-7-2. Thiago Motta, trying to be a bit maybe overthinking things, but it's more of how they set up. And Calafiori was absolutely given license to just go wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted. And he was just super fun, super direct. He generated more chances following a carry than any other centre-back across Europe's top 5 leagues last season. So it shows you that he's got a real penchant for taking the ball and just going. So maybe that could work at left back, and maybe I've done him a bit of a disservice saying that he's not two-way, but I just think he's maybe a bit different to Ben White mechanically and physically. But I really like the player. I think he's a bit of a unicorn, to be honest.
Maybe there needs to be a bit of an investigation into Bologna's 5th place finish if Thiago Motta was playing a 2-7-2. That's extra man on the pitch is a tactical development that not too many would get away with. But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Involving the goalkeeper, though. That's the
right,
point.
That's fair enough.
It's that the goalkeeper, is considered an outfielder. But
right.
Italy, you never know what's going on over there.
No, that's very true. That is very true. It does feel quite Arteta, though, doesn't it? That there's been so much talk about midfield. There's been so much talk about the forward line, adding a 9, adding a winger, adding, somebody with pace. All of those things are the main things that people have been talking about. And Mikel Arteta's like, well, if there's a chance to bring in another defender, I'll bring in another defender. I sort of, it feels very Arteta to me, like he'll look at last season and think, okay, what can I do differently? Do I need more goals? Maybe I need more goals. That's something I can address. But if I can let in even fewer goals, if I can add more solidity, add more defensive strength, and then add something else on top of that, it feels like a very Arteta thing to do, above and beyond all the talk about improving the left-back position. Something like this, when everyone's looking for an 8 or a 6 or a winger or a striker or a Sesko or whoever it might be, Mikel Arteta, in fine tradition, George Graham used to collect central defenders. He's like, bring me another centre half and I'll play him left back. Maybe I'll play him in defensive midfield. Who knows? Maybe we'll finally get that central defender who can play in defensive midfield.
Yeah, Arteta feels very much a foundation first kind of manager. He likes to be settled defensively, which can then give your offensive play a platform. And I have no issue with that. I think, what made him so exciting, even when maybe we didn't see the vision, was that he was so keen straight away to sort out this defense. And it hasn't always been smooth. It hasn't always been easy. But during his earlier maybe year or two at the club, there was a strong focus on getting the defense right. And I think you can see that he's very much once we sort this, then the other stuff will fall into place kind of manager. And I think we are largely settled defensively. To be honest, we've been outstanding. He's slowly been adding pieces every summer. The addition of Declan Rice helped us a huge amount last season in terms of how we were off the ball and also proactively in him being that guy to go and get the ball and cause those high turnovers as well. I think left back has been a problem area for the last season, to be quite honest, with injuries and players not quite fitting what he wants. So yeah, maybe this is the guy that he sees to bring a bit more balance. He's another tall player, someone that is very physically robust, but also a very elegant player, comfortable in possession. As I said, he likes to bring the ball forward. He's a much more carrier than passer, is what I would say. That is his natural instinct in terms of progressing the ball. I think someone like William Saliba likes to progress the ball with his distribution, whereas I look at Calafiori and he's much more comfortable carrying the ball. And he really helped Bologna break games open last season, because while their possession play is quite measured, organised, you don't really expect a 6'2" centre-back to stride forward, beat three players and make assists, So, but he's also very strong defensively as well. And he actually surprised me last season because I found him a bit soft, a bit lightweight when he first came through. He was the typical tall player who maybe hadn't quite grown into their body yet. And I think he needed time to do that. Now he's very aggressive, physically strong, wins his aerial duels. He looks to make those quick interceptions in front of the strikers or opposition wingers. And, there's a real, I'm going to take the ball and man here to his slide tackling. So there's lots to like. Even, again, just looking at a few stats, he won possession more times than anybody else for Bologna last season. He won the most aerial duels. He made the most interceptions, and he even made the most assists. So that shows you already that there is a lot to this player's game, which will have been, of course, maximized by his freedom in the Bologna system, but still lots to like in what feels like a very well-rounded game. And I'm always wary of signing players who have kind of broken out at a major international tournament. And I think that has inflated the fee slightly, in addition to FC Basel holding I think it's 50% sell-on clause.
Right.
So the price had to be a little bit higher so that Bologna could get their money's worth as well. But lots to like, really lots to like. And I think at face value, he seems to suit this Arsenal team, even if I'm not convinced he is 100% the right profile, or the profile that I would have wanted, let's say.
Yeah,
but maybe,
Yeah, I'm sort of fascinated by this left side because I think over on the right, we've got Ben White, we've got Bukayo Saka, we've got Martin Odegaard, we've got this sort of highly super functional triangle of players. That trio has been so important. Whereas on the left-hand side, there's been so much change. Think about the discussion of Martinelli, and I'm not trying to make any excuses for Martinelli, but when Bukayo Saka has Martin Odegaard and Ben White with him for 36, 37 games, I think it does make a difference to him, whereas Martinelli had different players at left back, different players in the left side of midfield in that fabled left 8 position. And I'm really curious as to what the plan is some versatility on that side of the pitch the antidote to the right side consistency? Or do you try and build something on that left side which operates in kind of the same way? Might be Declan Rice's the left eight in whatever role that might be deployed next season, whether it's Martinelli or Trossard. I mean, I think, the long-term guy is Martinelli. Trossard did so well and scored a lot of goals, but I think if you're looking at the long-term guy, it's got to be Martinelli and or somebody else if that's a signing down the line. And I also think consistency at left back is something that we've been missing. I think we've done well, but we've also been missing because Timber started the season there, and I don't want to have that discussion again about, well, he would have been our left back all season. I'm not sure he would have. Kivior was there, Tomiyasu was there, Zinchenko was there. It's good to have options, but it's also good to have consistency and to build relationships. So whatever's going on this summer and whatever they're planning, and we're still very much in the dark when it comes to what Arsenal really want to do, I do wonder about whether that left side is something they're going to pay particular attention to.
I think we have to. If you look at Arsenal and how they play, everything is so heavily biased towards the right side. And I think a lot of that is tactical as well, because with someone like Martinelli out on the left-hand side, who's more of an inside forward instead of a winger like Saka, he's very much an end product guy, whereas Saka is more involved in the build-up. He can provide the link-up. He can provide the assist. Whereas I think Martinelli, that kind of player, their thoughts are always the goal, basically. The quickest way to goal, how can I get closer to goal? And part of why we have such a right-sided bias is to isolate Martinelli on that left-hand side so he can be the one finishing moves. But too often last season, there was nothing on the left-hand side. We had no, like you said, relationships, automatisms. There wasn't really any consistency in that position. We saw Emile Smith Rowe come in a couple of times. We saw Declan Rice play there. We saw Kai Havertz play there. We saw Leandro Trossard play there. Whereas on the right-hand side, who are the three? Bukayo Saka, Martin Odegaard, Ben White, basically playing every single game. And you can see that in how... sorry, there's an ambulance going by.
That's all right.
You can see that in how smooth their mechanics are, their relationship is on that side. And I just think we were kind of easy, a bit like how England have been during this Euro 2024. Everyone's forcing the ball over to the left side because they know that there's nothing there with Kieran Trippier coming in all the time. Phil Foden likes to come in towards the centre as well. So all the teams playing England force them over to that left-hand side because they know the danger's on the right.
Yeah.
And I feel like teams did that at times for Arsenal last season. And thankfully, our right side is good enough to be able to handle that kind of pressure and players doubling up on Saka and Ben White going on the overlap. So it wasn't a huge issue. But even if we are wedded towards making the right side a bit more prominent, you need a functioning left-hand side as well. And for sure, I would be surprised if there weren't additions to either the left wing position or the fabled left eight. I know we've this is like the biggest buzzword in Arsenal history now, the left eight, but it's clear that this is a position that needs to be sorted. So I completely subscribe to your point that this needs to be figured out, basically.
All right. Well, we'll have to wait and see if Calafiori is going to be part of that particular plan. But there's a few other bits and bobs going on from a transfer perspective, but they're all involving players going out. Albert Sambi Lokonga linked with Sevilla, which would be a nice move for him. Apparently discussions between the player and the club are going pretty well. It's about what Arsenal can expect from Sevilla. It looks like it could be a loan. There's talk of Sevilla being willing to pay or agree to an €8 million option. Arsenal are holding out for a €12 million option. I know it's a different market when you go abroad, but given some of the fees that we're seeing in the Premier League at this moment in time, I don't necessarily blame Arsenal for trying to hold out for a little bit more on this. Whether or not it scuppers the deal or not, we don't know. There's no question La Liga clubs don't have the same kind of spending power and at this moment in time aren't involved in the same kind of semi-fraudulent fucking bullshit that's going on with certain Premier League clubs. But, you know, for a player who arrived highly rated from Anderlecht, didn't quite work out, you know, there's still a player in there who I think can do a good job for a club like Sevilla.
Completely. And I think at that moment in time, Sambi was definitely worth a gamble for Arsenal. He was extremely highly rated in Belgium, had captained Anderlecht already from a young age, was pushing into the national team picture. And a lot of other big clubs across Europe, AC Milan, Borussia Dortmund, were following him as well. So he had a big reputation. It didn't work out at Arsenal for a few reasons, but I'm so sure that there is talent in this player. It's just about whether we can kind of get a decent fee for him. And I think we should be not expecting a decent fee, but I think we're well within our rights to kind of say, look, we are not going to be taken for a ride here because this is still a very talented player, even if he couldn't push into this Arsenal team. It's a shame that Luton didn't stay up because I think that might have been a potential option for us next season. And obviously with Premier League money, that maybe adds another 5 or even 10 million onto a potential fee. And you're completely right to bring up teams on the continent who can't match that. It's impossible to match that. And people are kind of getting frustrated and up in arms about it. And I'm frustrated too, because I think we are not unreasonable to be demanding 15, 16, 17 million, basically what we paid for him. I don't think he's got worse as a player. I think maybe his reputation has taken a bit of a hit, but in terms of the talent, I don't think he's got any worse. So this just might be the position that Arsenal are in this summer, in that we might have to accept some lower fees from teams in Italy or teams in Spain or teams in France just to get these players off the books. I know that alone isn't what people want to hear about or read about, but if we can maybe put in an obligation in there, I know that's what a lot of the hold-up has been about. Sevilla prefer an option, Arsenal prefer an obligation, but loan with options don't really do anything for us at the moment. And has anybody ever taken an option to buy?
I don't know.
From any loan ever?
The loans with obligation feel a little difficult as well, because like the obligation usually involves some kind of clause whereby, you know, if he plays X amount of games, you trigger the obligation. And I think we've seen examples in the past of how a player, if he plays 21 games, there's an obligation to buy him for this much, and the player plays 19 games and then all of a sudden doesn't fucking play again because the club, it's not that they don't like the player, but they just prefer to go a different direction, you know. So they're kind of hard to put in place. You know, I understand an obligation sounds a bit better, but I think it's just as kind of up in the air, really.
Yeah, what I would be expecting if this deal goes through is a 2 million loan fee plus a 10 million or 11 million option. That is what I'm expecting. I would love an obligation, but I just don't see it. And I think what Arsenal will be hoping for is a decent loan fee. Maybe he has a good season and then comes back and reassess our options again. I don't know what his contract situation is. Is it does he have 2 years left?
I think 2 years
this summer. So it's not the best place to be sitting when he comes back next summer, if he comes back next summer. But that is what I'm expecting. I'm expecting a loan plus option that will be around 10 or 11 million. I just don't think there's any money on the continent, to be honest. And we maybe need to take a step back as fans and realize that this could be a bit of a frustrating summer for those kind of players, the Nuno Tavares, Sambi Lokonga style guys, as opposed to Nketiah, Smith Rowe, Reece Nelson, where I think maybe we could get a little bit more for them in the 20 to 25 million range. Reece Nelson, I'm not so sure. I think that'll be more, 10 to 15 at a push, if we're lucky. But Smith Rowe and Nketiah, I think there is a natural market for them, being young English players with a lot of experience under their belts. But for the others, I'm not so sure. Yeah,
Nuno Tavares, you mentioned, he's been linked with a move to Ajax. It is by that Sky Cave guy, so, pinch of salt at the ready. Depends how much you want to apply, how much salt you want to apply to that. But he's got a year left on his Arsenal contract. He did an interview last week. I saw it. He said, I'll come back if Arsenal want me to come back. I'm not sure that will be the case.
We don't.
Yeah, well, I mean...
They don't.
They don't. But Ajax probably makes some sense if there's a willingness on both parts or part of both clubs to get that done, it feels like something that could get done pretty easily. Again, though, what sort of money there might be, I don't know. Ajax had a terrible season last season, didn't they? So there's not a lot of spare cash swimming around there. It's not like they've got a load of Champions League money coming in next season or anything like that. So again, it might just be one of those deals that happens to get a player off the books.
Yeah, I could see a 4 to 5 million transfer again here. It's really frustrating because we know that there's talent in these players, and it's even more frustrating when we see teams like Chelsea, for example, who haven't even played anybody, and then they get £20 million or 30 or 35 million pounds after 6 months on loan somewhere or a season on loan somewhere. And Arsenal already have this reputation of being bad sellers, so that is just snowballing every year. But again, I think if it came to Ajax buying Nuno Tavares for £5 million and Arsenal rejecting that and keeping him around for no reason, then what's the point?
Yeah, so, I mean, if we got £5 million for Nuno Tavares, I would fucking have a street party and everybody's invited.
Well, okay, let's say two or three then.
Yeah.
I think you need to just take that on the chin and do it, because there's no point having these guys not playing, sitting there not even on the bench. They won't even be making the bench. No. So get them off the books, wish them well. We took a gamble on you when we were in a strange moment trying to rebuild. You haven't paid off. Shake hands and on we go. Yeah. So I think there needs to just be maybe a slight taming of expectations for some of these fees that we get for players, especially those who are not being sold to Premier League clubs, because Europe's broke, man.
Yeah.
Europe's broke.
Thankfully, there is Premier League interest, reported Premier League interest in Emile Smith Rowe. That comes from Fulham. Fulham about to be replete with cash because they're going to sell João Palhinha to Bayern Munich for £47 million, which is a tremendous deal when you consider he is going to turn 29 in a couple of days' time. Until then, though, he remains 28. That is how it works. But it's a good chunk of money for Palhinha. It's also a good chunk of money for Arsenal to reference should Fulham decide to make a play for Emile Smith Rowe. Arsenal can turn around and say, yep, we're open to a deal, but we know you've got a few quid in the bank now from the Palhinha transfer. That one feels to me like it'd be a good move for Fulham and it'd be a good move for Emile Smith Rowe.
Agreed. He needs to go. I have so much. Well, I've invested a lot into Emile Smith Rowe, and I'm desperately sad that it hasn't worked out for him, because I think he's a fantastic player. I think he can still offer this team a lot, but we haven't been able to see it on a consistent basis through a number of reasons: injuries, his own inconsistency, Arteta not quite being convinced enough to play him, in a couple of positions. And for me, it's just the time to close this chapter, wish him really well, and hope that he can flourish elsewhere. And for Arsenal to get a good fee for one of their academy boys. I could see this one happening, to be honest. He stays in London at Fulham. He probably doesn't even have to move anywhere. A lot of his kind of routines and day-to-day life will not need to change. I think Fulham could probably pay a good wage. I think they are a fun team who maximize that type of talent. I look at Andreas Pereira, I look at Harry Wilson, I look at Willian, those kind of guys who do their work in the final third, tend to be maximized under Marco Silva. Even Alex Iwobi has played very well at Fulham. So it's just time. I'm really sad, because if you told me that 2.5 years ago, this would be where we were at with Smith Rowe, I wouldn't have believed you. But this is where we are, and it's a big shame. But now we need to look about protecting our own interests, and I think Fulham present a really nice option for the player, both in terms of on the pitch and off the pitch business. And I think I'm not really sure what their record signing is. It might be 25 million. It could even be Alex Iwobi,
Right.
But you'd have to double check that. But if I was looking at a potential fee for Emile Smith Rowe, it would be around that 20 to 25 million pound mark. How we get there, it could be involving a few add-ons. It could be a 20 plus 5. And I think people will be frustrated not to hear a bit more. Mm-hmm. But again, it's better to get these guys off the books knowing that they won't be able to contribute next season. So this is one that makes sense in my head, I have to say.
Transfermarkt say that the record Fulham arrival is 30 million euros. Jean-Michel Seri.
Wow.
From Nice.
Is he their record signing? Goodness me.
Alex Iwobi next. Then you've got players like Frank Anguissa, Alexander Mitrovic, Calvin Bassey, João Palhinha. They're their signings in the 20 millions. I'm with you on Smith Rowe. I think it's a real shame. I love him as a player. I love the kind of the talent that we saw from him when he made his breakthrough. He just always felt a little fragile physically and has had some issues in that regard. And sort of the wider point about him being an academy player, I think the same applies for Eddie Nketiah and Reece Nelson. And we hear these discussions about what are we going to get for these guys? How much are they going to generate? What kind of profit can we book because of PSR rules and their academy and it's all profit and blah, blah, blah. I think the other thing is to step back objectively as well and think about what these three guys need at this point in their careers. They are financial assets to Arsenal right now, but from their own perspectives, Reece Nelson doesn't start Premier League games. He barely starts any games at all for Arsenal. Go play. Emile Smith Rowe doesn't really play. Go play. Eddie Nketiah not fell out of favour, but wasn't really used in the second half of last season. Go and play. You're 23, 24, 25 years of age. The best years of your career are ahead of you. And I hope, above and beyond the fact that I want to see Arsenal sell well and generate revenue that we can reinvest back in the squad. I want to see these guys go and just, have a good career and
completely
just enjoy their football. It's a short career as well. You can't sit around and you can't just let it pass you by. I think these guys, they may not be at the level that we want right now, but they're talented players. And they've got enough to show and have shown enough that they can go on and have good careers elsewhere. So above and beyond the finances, I really want them to go and just kick on and have a good time wherever it might be, whether it's Fulham or Crystal Palace or somewhere else in the Premier League or abroad. I do hope that is part of their thinking as well, because they have to think of themselves at this point. Not a lot else happening from an Arsenal perspective. We're expecting David Raya to be confirmed as the first major signing of the summer. But of course, that's been in place since last August or whenever that deal went through. So it's not a huge surprise, but that will be the first outlay, as David Raya coming in as next season's official number one. Depends whether or not he will be wearing that number one shirt. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, look, this one was kind of written on the wall for a long time. We knew that they were going to make this deal permanent, and I think he showed enough during his time here that he was capable of being that number one for Arsenal, despite a shaky start and all of the narrative around the move and Ramsdale. And we kind of did well to come through that, I would say, because there was a lot of fuss about it every game and, showing Ramsdale on the bench, and every mistake or save was being applauded. There was Ramsdale again on the bench, and every mistake, there was Ramsdale on the bench. And I don't think Arteta helped himself with a few comments, but once Raya came in, there was a gradual acceptance that this was what was going to happen. And I think Ramsdale also coming in and not entirely convincing in some of his cameos also helped to smoothen the blow, I would say, because, we saw some nerves, we saw some errors. So it's a shame as well, because we took to Aaron Ramsdale, but he doesn't really have a future at the club. That's another one that maybe needs to be spoken about, because I'm getting a little bit worried about that situation now, because we've got an expensive asset just kind of sitting there without a huge amount of options. Newcastle have already signed about 4 different goalkeepers this window.
What the fuck?
And beyond that, I maybe look at some of the more mid-table clubs, Bournemouth, Wolves, those kind of teams who could maybe spend a bit of money on a keeper of that quality. But that's another one. But David Raya has come in. It's clear that he's favoured by Arteta and the coaching staff. So yeah, I think that was kind of ready and written. He's adapted pretty well. I think it's quite clear that he's our number one. Until we sign Joan Garcia for 85 million euros, and then he can be the number one come August.
We talk about like Arteta collecting defenders and George Graham collecting centre halves. Mikel Arteta fucking loves signing goalkeepers, man.
Either that or Inaki Kanya has a clause in his contract that says he has complete and utter control about any goalkeeping signing this club makes.
Yeah.
This guy, we've spoken about Arteta's ability to manage upwards and kind of schmooze the Cronkies and create a relationship with them. Inaki Kanya must be the most charming man in the world to kind of appeal to Mikel Arteta here, because the responsibility that he is being given, Arsenal can't sign a goalkeeper without Iñaki Kanya being mentioned. So he's got some juice somewhere.
He definitely does. And when you consider a couple of the goalkeepers that have come in under his watch, I think he's doing well for his reputation to remain as intact as it is, to be quite honest. But
Runner Runnerson, we do not forget you.
No, and even Matt Turner, and I'm not on this day of all days, on the 4th of July, I'm not going in on Matt Turner, right? But as a profile, as a fit for what we wanted for a goalkeeper, it was just the opposite, of what we were looking for. So it was strange business, but like you say, maybe he's a very charming man with an alluring musk, and that allows him to get away with a few mistakes here or there. All right, let's look ahead to this weekend and the European Championships and the Euro 2024 games that are on. Starting on Friday, it feels a bit of a shame that some of these games are quarterfinals rather than semifinals or potential finals. Spain versus Germany, I think one of the most interesting games, because when you're looking at teams who have kind of done themselves justice based on what the expectations were, I think Spain and Germany are the two really who have, of the, in inverted commas, big nations who really have performed to the level that people would want. So it's going to be a fascinating game, this one.
I think so. And like you said, it's a shame that this is taking place in a quarterfinal, because I've been really impressed by both teams. I think out of all the teams who maybe came into the tournament as favourites, Spain, Germany, Portugal, England, obviously France in there as well, they've given the best account of themselves and have looked the most settled tactically. They've had some really good showings with star players making a difference, especially attacking players who have kind of had a real big impact in this tournament. I think of Nico Williams and Yamal for Spain. I think of Musiala for Germany, and maybe Florian Wirtz to a lesser extent. Obviously, Toni Kroos has been back to his best. So these are the teams I've enjoyed watching the most, beyond the kind of slightly smaller nations, let's say a Turkey, an Austria, even a Georgia, who were really fun to watch at times. So I'm really looking forward to this one. It's going to be, I hope it's a good game. I really don't want these teams to kind of fall into their shell and realize that, oh God, this is a quarterfinal, and maybe there's a wave of jeopardy that just falls over both teams and we get one of the most boring games in history. Which is always potentially on at this stage of a tournament. And I really hope it isn't, because I want to see these two kind of going at each other with the confidence that they've been showing throughout the tournament so far.
I think what's interesting about this particular game is that you can look at some of the other teams and, maybe France are part of it, England are part of it as well, where the defensive platform, even if they've underperformed from an attacking perspective, they've been difficult to break down and don't concede too many goals. So when they would be faced with a scenario like this, that might be their default, is to sort of lean into that. Whereas I think with Germany and I think with Spain, they can both exert control over games, but they do it in different ways. They do it with midfield, with Toni Kroos, with Rodri. It's not that they don't have good defenders, but it's not as if that is their particular strength. And then you're looking at Nico Williams, you're looking at Yamal, you're looking at Wirtz and Musiala, and even Kai Havertz, who I think has been impactful, if imperfect, during this tournament. And I think, you know, this is where they could really come to the fore. You know, Germany have good defenders. Spain have some good defenders. Rudiger could be mental. You know, all of this kind of stuff could play into it. But I don't feel like this is a game where they're going to say, okay, Spain are really good, so we will defend. And Spain are certainly not going to say, well, Germany are good, we will defend. That's not how either of these sides set up at all.
Yeah, I think what I've been impressed with as well from both of these teams is that they realize that they're the big dogs, and they kind of say, look, we might be vulnerable in transition on occasion, but we back our own talent going forward that we can beat most teams. And I think that's absolutely what you should be doing as one of the, again, in quotes, big nations, is that you need to realize the amount of talent and quality that you've got going forward and back yourselves. You know, I think Germany have been vulnerable on occasion in transition. Spain have been vulnerable on occasion in transition, but they look so settled and comfortable in what they are doing offensively in terms of their patterns of play, their pressing, how they can isolate someone like Musiala against the defender, or how they can isolate someone like Nico Williams against a right back, and lean into your strengths. What I feel with England is there's just this perpetual unwillingness to do that. And even France, to an extent, I know a lot of their strength lies with their defense and their defensive line, which has been excellent, but that doesn't mean you need to be boring as hell going forward.
Oh, God. And they have been. They really have been.
Yeah, I'm really glad that wasn't one of the quarterfinals, to be honest. Because
England-France.
England against France would have just been, no.
Yeah.
I don't even want to think about it. So, you know, hopefully they can go on that pitch and just be like, look, we know that we're one of the best teams in the tournament, playing against one of the best teams in this tournament, but let's go for it and hopefully make an event of this, because I think that's what you want in these latter stages.
Sure.
And they're both equally capable of doing that. And I you know, especially with Germany being the hosts, this could be a really kind of exciting, ferocious atmosphere to match the game. Yeah,
Portugal-France is the other game. You know, France have really disappointed me from an attacking perspective because they've got so much talent. It's ridiculous. You look at the squad, you look at what they've got on the field, you look at what they've got on the bench, and in every game it's like, well, William Saliba's been their best player, or Theo Hernandez has been their best player, or Jules Koundé has been one of their best players, and everything appears to be built around that back four, which is formidable, and that is, you know, something to acknowledge and give credit to, but they have been disappointing from an attacking perspective. Maybe the injury to Mbappe has inhibited him, but it hasn't really worked for them. They're facing a Portugal side who knows what you're going to get from this Portugal side beyond Cristiano Ronaldo wanting to take all the free kicks. It'll be fascinating to see who takes the first free kick in this game, if there is one outside the France box. Will Bruno Fernandes be given the opportunity, or will Ronaldo make it all about himself again? I did enjoy his quote about how they were going to have to go to war with France. The idea of Cristiano going to war is quite funny to me. I don't know, you step out onto the front lines, burst into tears and run off in the other direction.
With a ginger and ginseng shot, I'm sure, to kind of fuel that incredible six-pack. And to be fair, what do those influencers do now? The kind of the alpha influencers, they say that grounding is good for you, don't they?
What's that?
It's when you go outside and you just put your feet on the grass for like a few minutes to feel connected with nature again.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Are people making a living doing that, to go outside in your bare feet and stuff? Oh my God, what a world do we fucking live in.
When they wake up at 5 a.m. to pray and do their a million things before they take their kids to school at 7:30.
Yeah. You must only eat the liver of a bison. That is how you become the fucking true man. That kind of...
And journal. so that's how I see Ronaldo kind of in any war, to be honest, with a bowl of boiled chicken and rice and broccoli behind him as well. So Portugal have been a funny one, to be honest, because I don't think they've been bad, but I don't think they've been good either. I think they've been perfectly functional. They've had a few games to figure out their formation and what they want to do and who's playing best in the back three and in the back four. I think on the whole, they've been fine. Defensively, they are still strong with Pepe back there, who's been unbelievable. Apart from that one mistake against Slovenia that could have been punished but wasn't. Ruben Diaz, obviously very strong. Nuno Mendes, good player. João Cancelo, obviously a good player as well. So the key for me, we mentioned him earlier, is João Palhinha in front of that back four, because what he does is just stand there, kick everything that tries to come close to the back four, and then the other players can do what they need to do further forward. So he will have a big role to play in this game, stopping France, what they want to do, whether that's in transition or whether they want to dominate the ball. It's a bit difficult because neither of these two teams really dominate possession. But if I am looking to someone to do it, it's Portugal because of Vitinha, because of Bruno. So quite evenly matched, I would say, but neither team has caught a light yet, if that makes sense.
No, that's true. And I think Portugal have to fight against Roberto Martinez to an extent as well. When the other night he takes Vitinha off and it's like, what are you doing? That is a handicap for them, but I do think that game is evenly matched, even though I think when you look at it, and they're good attacking players on all sides, I think France probably have the edge in terms of depth and quality, but Deschamps and his inherent conservatism with his lineups and who plays in midfield and all the rest of it maybe might just play into Portugal's hands. Of course, they've got to break down that back four that we talked about, and it's been a very, very impressive back four, so we'll keep an eye on that one. Netherlands, Turkey, before we get quickly to England and Switzerland, Netherlands, Turkey feels like it could be another fun game where you've got two teams who are evenly matched, who are probably both going to have a go. We saw Turkey defend very well the other night and defend on the back foot and defend deep. I don't know that Netherlands can make them do quite that the way that Austria did, but certainly the spark that they showed in their game against Romania, if they can replicate that, they missed a lot of chances, but they created a lot of chances in that game. Turkey will have some players back from suspension as well, which will be useful for them. So I think that, to me, is the one I'm looking at as the kind of, this is the hell for leather classic of this of these quarterfinals.
It definitely gives that vibe on paper. And again, there's not a huge favourite in this game. I think Netherlands, through their stature alone, will be slight favourites going into this, but Turkey are riding a huge emotional wave at the moment. And it's a huge shame to lose Austria because I thought they gave this tournament a lot. But that performance from Turkey, that defensive performance in particular in those latter stages, kind of gives teams like this something in international football. It strengthens their bond, the collective. They have a huge following in Germany, native and non-native. So maybe that could work in their favour as well. I think they've got some outstanding young players who can make a difference in Kenan Yildiz, Arda Güler. You've got Hakan Çalhanoğlu coming back as well. So let's see. To be honest, against Romania, that was the first time I saw the Netherlands looking competent. They looked finally balanced after 4 games. They made some good decisions in midfield, making it a 2 and not a 3. I thought their attacking players gave them a lot more in this game than they have in recent games, with Xavi Simons, Gakpo, Depay all looking quite lively. So yeah, could absolutely be a fun one. And a bit like Austria-Turkey, this is one that I'm kind of looking at with an eyebrow raised, because I think this could be a bit end-to-end entertaining, maybe some goals in there as well. So fingers crossed. Fingers crossed for that.
And then, of course, we have England versus Switzerland. So much has been said about England and the performances. It just strikes me that after, 4 games to get to this point of the tournament where the issue of balance in his team is the most obvious thing when it comes to England, that this is if Gareth Southgate doesn't do something about the balance of his team for this game, and he may well be forced into some decisions because Trippier is potentially injured, Luke Shaw, I don't know if you can play Luke Shaw in a quarterfinal of a Euros, having not played since February and only just returning to training. It would be just crazy to me. It might be a case that he is forced into either a formation change or a system change of some kind, or positional changes. It really wouldn't surprise me if he played Bukayo Saka on the left and brought in Cole Palmer and maybe played Anthony Gordon. I don't know. But if he doesn't address the balance of his team and the fact that players can't perform when they're getting in each other's way, or the options are not there for them to sort of display the talent that they have because, well, there's nobody to pass it to when I'm in this area of the pitch, or there's nobody, unless he does something about that, I think this is a game that Switzerland will win.
I've been really impressed with Switzerland.
Yeah,
and when the bracket kind of developed, I was worried for England because Switzerland are everything England are not. Organized, aware of what they need to be doing, both collectively and individually. They are experienced, they are fit, and I look at them, and the key issue again is balance. Switzerland are extremely balanced, playing that 3 at the back formation. I've really liked what they've done with the wing backs as well, having one invert and one being a bit more traditional in terms of getting forward. They've had some good players up front who have given them a little bit of energy and speed in attacking areas. And I think for sure England need to change something. And there was, there were some whispers yesterday. When the press will come out with the same story at 6 o'clock. So they've obviously been fed something about England going back to a back 3. Wouldn't surprise me at all to see Bukayo at left wing back, with someone like Joe Gomez or Ezri Konsa coming into that back line. Obviously, Mark Gahey is suspended, so that's another problem. They need to change something. They can't carry on like this, changing one player in the midfield and expecting things to change. So all eyes are on Southgate in terms of what he does there. I think going back three against back 3 might help them a little bit, just to kind of match up the Swiss team and formation, who, again, look very settled and comfortable in what they're doing. So let's see. You can't play Luke Shaw. Luke Shaw. And for me, I'm done with Trippier. I'm sick of him coming in on his right side every five minutes, narrowing the pitch, making it smaller, get a natural left-footed player out there. And it's obviously not where we want to see Bukayo Saka. It's not where we know that he is at his best. But extreme times call for extreme measures. And this is very much an extreme time for England. So if that's what's going to help the team and the collective, he might have to suck up his pride a bit and just do a job.
All right, well, we'll see what happens over the course of the weekend with those games. Hopefully they're good, entertaining games. Before we go, Phil, bit of good news out of Manchester. It's not the fact that Manchester United have announced they're laying off 250 staff. Imagine if the Glazers had announced the redundancies of 250 staff. People would go absolutely fucking crazy, wouldn't they?
Not to mention their disgraceful treatment of the women's team as well. Putting them in Portaloos and also in the men's changing room at times at Carrington. And now there's even been talk of them being put up at St. George's Park. Which is like 2 hours away from Carrington. Just ridiculous.
Yes, but the good news is that Eric Ten Hag has signed a new contract, so you must be very pleased.
I am. I mean, even better, it's an extension which has not changed any of the terms. So he's retaining, the influence and power over transfers, which I think you can see as he's trying to get his Ajax 2018-19 team back together again with Matthias de Ligt coming in. I mean, that's going to be Lisandro Martinez, de Ligt, Anthony and Onana all at Manchester United now, plus Donny van der Beek.
Dusan Tadic incoming, despite the fact he's 35 years of age.
Back together.
60 million pounds on Tadic. Do it.
And they were even linked with Edson Alvarez at the start of this summer window, but he got injured, which kind of put them off a bit, which is crazy. But yeah, just amazingly funny to see that it's on the same terms, knowing that everything he had done in the last 18 months was just a straight disaster. both in terms of transfers and his tactics, which for me seems crazy. I think, again, this is a marriage of convenience. After doing everything possible to try and undermine him and embarrass his position at the club, they've now settled on him being the guy because nobody else was available. And it's just embarrassing for them. It's embarrassing for him. And I don't see how anything changes. I mean, they're not going to finish, what was it, 8th where they finished last year? They're not going to finish 8th. But I don't see anything improving drastically anytime soon. And I don't know, for what this new takeover was supposed to bring and symbolize, it hasn't been great, let's be honest, so far. And people are right to be skeptical of Sir Jim. I know they're putting together this super team behind the scenes. But it was really funny because there was a United account who said, you know, this guy's come in, Dan Ashworth has come in, Dave Brailsford has been there, and then someone created like a lineup with all of these people playing up front, left back, and in central midfield, and then Anthony was still there on the right wing, and it's just like, yes, of course, you need an important structure in place, and as Arsenal fans, we know that more than anybody. But at some point, you have to correct what's happening on the pitch, and a big problem, you know, in the name of Erik ten Hag, is still there. So let's see. Eventually they will get their shit together, but I don't see it happening in the next 12 months or while Erik ten Hag is still there. All
right, well, plenty to look forward to next season, and as Manchester United are finding out, having a Sir Jimmy around the place is not always good for for everyone. All right, we will leave it there. Phil, thanks a million as always. Great to talk to you.
Thank you. Nice to chat as always.
Thank you very much indeed to Phil. You can find him on Twitter. He is @_Phil Costa. That is @_Phil Costa. And you can hear Phil throughout the season over on our Patreon. We do our Premier League podcast called The 30. If that's something you'd be interested in for next season, feel free to come join us. In the meantime, you'll get lots of extra content. We're doing Euro 2024 podcasts. We've had them all the way through the tournament. And of course, this weekend with the quarterfinals coming up, we'll have those as well. It costs $6 a month. You get all the extra content, Discord chat, loads more besides. And you help support everything that we do on Arseblog. Arseblog is completely ad-free, as I'm sure you know. The websites do not carry any advertising, pop-ups, pop-unders, auto videos. We never did that, but we do zero. So we do rely on your support to keep things going. And if you feel like what we do is worth $6 a month to you, you can sign up at patreon.com/Arseblog. That's patreon.com/Arseblog. Right, let's leave it there. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you so much as always for being here. We'll have an Arsecast extra for you on Monday. As I said, content over the weekend over on Patreon. So for now, take it easy, folks, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye.